Yo, hey guys, welcome. I always leave my headphones on and I got to take them off. It looks better for you. Right, I'm responding to a few of your comments. There's a couple of things here that I wanted to speak out against. No, I wanted to speak out and just give my voice, my opinion on. Because often people will take your ideas and not necessarily see them in a broader context as you would like. Not criticising any of these comments at all. Just things I wanted to add based on what people were saying. Let's start with Rob Marrick. I think you're ignoring the fact that Adele has a rare vocal tone that has nothing to do with technique or skill. She can't take any more credit for the natural timbre resonance of her voice than she can for the colour of her eyes. Yes, a tone like that is combined with skill and technique, then you have a superstar. I'm sure there are many superior singers with regard to skill and technique, but without that superstar tone, they will never achieve her success. Examples of great tone and poor technique, especially evident in rock music. Have you ever heard a singing teacher try to sing Smells Like Teen Spirit? They could sing circles around Kurt, technically speaking, but his tone was that X factor that made him sound like a superstar. Also, Liam Gallagher is another example. Now, Rob, I agree with you in a lot of respects here. There's certainly a unique aspect to artistry that made Kurt Cobain what he was, made him sell. Made Liam Gallagher what he was, made him sell. I would argue in Liam's case, the dude didn't give a shit, literally. And you hear that especially in his early vocals. I actually think he became worse as a singer as time went on. The first two records they did, definitely maybe, and What's the Story, Morning Glory, I think it's called. He was at the top of his game. Mostly because he wasn't really even thinking about his voice. He was just emoting. And really, there was absolutely no filter between his character, his actions, and what he put out there. He was extremely authentic as a singer, and he was an arrogant young guy, and you could really hear that and tell that in his singing and his actions. And that combined made him this really authentic, magnetic kind of character that people want, because most people aren't as confident or as arrogant as that, frankly. But it was a good thing. It worked in his favour, especially in the 90s when historically, rock stars needed to have that swagger, a lot more so than they do today. Kurt Cobain, interestingly enough, kind of had some good technique going on. Now, he was kind of over squeezing and grinding a lot. Now, I say over squeezing in the sense that doing that all the time is not going to give you a longevity as a singer. Now, it might be desirable if you want to sacrifice your long-term career for today. If you want to sing for today and not for the future, then go for it. Who am I to judge? But the point is, he also had some good things going on. A lot of release in his voice, actually. Some of the... I remember listening to I think it's the Reading Festival. They headlined years ago in the 90s. I was... struck actually by some of the release in his voice. It was actually a remarkable amount of freedom in some of what he was doing. So even with a singer like that, you can pick out technique that he had above the average, I would say. But yeah, both those singers, great examples of tone over technique. Now Adele, I would argue, is slightly different. Firstly, I just want to counter this point of Adele's vocal tone has nothing to do with technique or skill. A part of that is true, a part of it isn't. Certainly, the shape of the cavities in her head, the length and the thickness of her vocal folds give her something unique. She's got a thick, heavy voice for a girl. But there are certainly a lot of aspects to her sound that are to do with her technique and skill. The fact that she can sing wide and open like that and stay with a split of resonance, that is to do with skill. And that wide openness gives her unique qualities in what sounds she makes, because it gives her a more broader palette of different types of qualities she can draw from. The downside of singing everything narrow, the upside is it's very safe. which is where Margarita was correct. It's safe. She sing forever like that. But it gives you a narrower palette of sounds to draw from. As you open up wider and wider, you can have a broader palette of sounds. You know, it's like being a painter. When you're singing narrow, you're a painter and you've got maybe 4 or 5 colours. When you sing on a broader vowel palette, you've now got, 15, 20 different colours you can draw from. Yeah? The same could be said of different compression levels. If you advocate for one compression level, you're actually narrowing down the different types of sounds a singer can make. And again, they've got less colours. They've got less paint colours in their paint box, literally. So you combine narrow vowels with one level of compression, you've got a pretty boring singer, but you've got a safe singer. Ask yourself what you'd like. So back to this. She can't take any credit for some of that natural timbre, but she can take credit for that broad vowel palette, like I just mentioned, and the different levels of compression that she uses when she sings. And that has something to do with her tone. That has something to do with what draws people in and gets them to pay for her singing and not Margarita's singing. So that's another thing to think about. This is a great post, by the way, and it really did get me thinking, and I hope I put together a decent answer for you. Right, next. Ivan. I think different than you, Carl, in this. If a singer gets stressed in the high notes and suspends a concert, it's because some of the technique is wrong and has to change it with urgency. And second, people do not want to hear people who sing forcing the throat. People love to sing technically, hear people sing technically well, Celine Dion, Pavarotti, etc. I know it's nothing to sing like in the example of. I know it's not okay to sing like in the example of Riggs, but that does not make you have to sing forcing. She's a very good singer, but she has to improve those high notes, or she will suffer for them. Okay, great. I totally agree with you. So I'm not sure where the difference is here, Ivan. I would say yes, you're right. She needs to improve. My point was, broadly speaking, she doesn't need to narrow down as aggressively as Margarita is advocating for. She needs to learn how to maintain that split of resonance. Maybe as a short-term solution, narrow down a little bit, but we're taking a sledgehammer to something. If you make the adjustments too big, yes, it will make your singing safe in the short term, but you've got to find a balance between helping her get right as close to that boundary as she can, and giving her the options to move back from that boundary when it's day to day. So day to day, your voice is capable of less or more, basically, especially on those difficult technical sounds like wide open vowels. Some days you're going to get them cleaner and healthier more so than others. So on those days where it's not working, you need an option. You need to be able to narrow down and make sure that you're working within what's physically possible for you that day. And those boundaries move. So you need to teach Adele how to maintain that split of resonance when she is singing really wide and open, so that she doesn't isolate the mouth and yell. And like I said in my video, she's very close to that boundary, but she can do it a lot of the time. Probably 90% of the time she maintains a split. Every now and again she will yell, but the point is you've got to give her the option. So yes, teach her to narrow down, teach her to close down that vowel so that she can stay in her mix on days that are tougher. You've got to give her the options to narrow down, but you've also got to give her the nuance of understanding that I've just explained, that some days she'll get it easier than others. On the days where it's harder, she might need to narrow down a little bit. On the days where it's easier, she might be able to open up, and to work at, when she's wide and open, making sure she's maintaining that split. Yeah, that's the difference ultimately. Now, that should give you some context, Ivan. Thank you for the post. And lastly, we got this one. Hey Carl, I don't think that's true about the safe zone part, because you look at Justin Bieber, he's the most popular artist in the world and he hardly ever sings high notes anymore. He mostly only sings F3 to E4, which is his comfort zone. He never sings out of it. He still has a lot more is a lot more famous than any of the other artists that you mentioned. He's not really singing he's not really a good singer at all. There's some truth in this, Ink King. I would say that it's dependent on what the artist established in terms of an audience when they began. So with Justin, if you think of a scale, a balance between basically an artist is mostly successful either for their looks and their subjective qualities, whether that be their show, their fashion, their good looks, etc., or they're famous for their ability. And that each artist has somewhat of a different balance. If you think of boy bands, they typically favour looks, youth, putting on a good show, all these factors a little bit more than they will artistic ability. That's not to say they have none. I think of Take That. There was quite a lot of talent in that group. Conversely, a singer like Adele was established on more of her music. Yeah, so there's a balance, and each artist is different. Justin is weighed quite heavily in the subjective side. So his looks, his youth, basically those two qualities are the main reason he sold records. Conversely, like I said, Adele's balanced slightly the other way. Now, all artists have a balance. Radiohead, all the artists I mention are obviously going to be balanced in favour of artistry and skill. They still will have a subjective side to what they're doing, but it's less weighted that way. Because I'm a singing teacher and I'm a singer. But you're right, some people are very famous and they aren't great singers. It doesn't really invalidate my point. I would argue that Adele is established primarily on her vocal ability. Without that, she's a pretty girl, but she's also an overweight girl. No disrespect, she's curvy. She's not typically the most. Hasn't got a model's figure. She's not. Trying to think of a good example. It's funny actually. I'm thinking of female artists that do look like models. There's not many of them. I don't really know why that would be. But where was I? Back to your point. I guess what I'm trying to argue here is that you've got to take each individual artist individually and weigh up where they are, what sold them as an artist. And if Justin Bieber loses his voice and sings badly, it doesn't really cost him anything because most of his trade isn't in that area. Whereas if Adele loses her voice, it costs her a lot because she's got, her whole act was established on that skill, and without that, what are people paying for, basically? That's the sense that I get, at least. So whilst there are examples that counter what I'm arguing in this video, those artists never sold for that reason in the first place. They never sold primarily based on their skill. They sold on their looks and their youth. So it's a different argument, it's a different situation, it's a different case. But anyway, it's a good point and one worth thinking about. And that's it, guys. I just wanted to respond to those three posts just to give you some extra understanding and give you some of my thoughts when I read these. Obviously, I can comment with text, and I do sometimes, but to write all this down would take me a long time. It's easier just to chuck it up on a video, and it gives you a better understanding. I hope that it gets across more some of the nuance in what I'm talking about, rather than you taking it the wrong way, which is easier in text. Though these are obviously all in response to a video I put up, so I don't know how much more useful it is, but there we go. I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Bye. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you want my help personally, you can book a one-on-one training session. Drop me a message. My email is in the description. And if you feel like this message was of value, then please feel free to make a donation equal to that value. Again, donation link is in the description. And finally, please share this video with other singers you know. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in another video. Bye.